I thought I'd start tonight by reading something by Richard Diebenkorn, who is someone who I admire deeply, and I keep these notes up in my studio. And these are Diebenkorn's notes to myself on beginning a painting. Attempt what is not certain. Certainty may or may not come later. It may then be a valuable delusion. The pretty initial position which falls short of completeness is not to be valued, except as a stimulus for further moves. Do search, but in order to find other than what is searched for, use and respond to the initial fresh qualities, but consider them absolutely expendable. Don't discover a subject of any kind. Somehow, don't be bored. But if you must, use it in action, use its destructive potential. Mistakes can't be erased, but they move you from your present position. Keep thinking about Pollyanna. So I interpret that to mean even if you've made a big mess, be optimistic that you'll pull yourself out of it. Tolerate chaos. Be careful only in a perverse way. So I keep this on my studio wall, and I got interested in his writings when I was thinking about this talk, and I discovered that he made lots of little notes like that. This is the list that's commonly presented, I think, to other artists, but another one that I found that I think is pretty apt is, it says, when I'm working well, I'm not trying for certain qualities or feelings. I'm trying to make the picture right, and the qualities and feelings follow. So I think that's a good hint for artists as well. So on all of these paintings, I don't start with a concept in mind. I usually pick colors, but beyond that, I don't really know what I'm doing when I start. I just start making a mess. And then at some point, I have to step back and think about the composition and things that I like and what I've put down and things that I don't like. And I start covering things up and scraping back. And that's how I develop paintings. And I think many of his notes apply to the way I work as well. Not that I have the end results that Diebenkorn had. And of course, he worked both figuratively and abstractly. So not all of these apply to working figuratively. So I thought I'd just show you a few of the things I use to make my messes that I have to respond to. I like to bring props to these talks. So these are just big stencils I found somewhere, and the shapes are just fabulous, and I don't remember where I got them. If I could get more like these, I would. But as you can see, some of these larger ones, when I had some paint on and I wanted to create more depth, I would just slap this up and put some black paint over it, move it around. I used these on several of these, and what I'm left with really is a mess that I then have to respond to, but then I have the depth that I'm looking for when I put these black marks up. So those are fun things that I've found. I use squeegees a lot. Do any of the other painters here use squeegees? They're really fun. You put a blob of paint on and then drag it across the surface, and it leaves interesting patterns. It reveals some of the paint underneath and covers up some other pieces. I think that big orange one I used a squeegee on a lot. There's a German painter called Gerhard Richter who does squeegee paintings. Some of his squeegees are this big, and he goes like this across a wall. Well, I use shower cleaners, but you get the idea. And then this is called a paint shaper, and I have a bunch of these as well. And you sort of use it like a squeegee, but you can lay paint down and scrape it off at the same time. And these are really great tools for abstract painting as well. You can use the edges to scrape into wet paint. And the other thing I discovered in working on these really big ones, which were just raw canvas, and I had never worked on raw canvas before. And of course, I started with the biggest piece of raw canvas that I had, not wanting to learn on anything small. And it's really hard to spread the paint on raw canvas because it just sucks it all up. So I started using this, which is called photo flow, and it's used by photographers in the darkroom. It's a wetting agent, so it makes water wetter. And you mix this in a solution, and then I could spray it on these canvases and paint into the dampened canvas, and it worked so much better than just working on a flat raw canvas. And I've also started just putting it in my paints to make them flow better. So if anybody is interested, when I take a photo of this, you can get it from Amazon for 10, 12 bucks or something, and this will probably last me the rest of my life. You do 2 drops per ounce of water. That's kind of all I had to say about the big paintings. Do people have any questions about these big works? You know, with a painting like this, it's on a stretched canvas. Sometimes I put them aside and then I work on them some more and I put them aside, or I can take them upstairs to see them in a different light. But these big pieces I had to staple onto my studio wall, and I could only do one at a time. So once I took it off the wall, it had to be done. Um, and actually that was good because I couldn't go back in and fiddle with it. You know, I had to get it to a certain point and then just decide, well, pull these staples out and that's it. So, you get a certain feeling that things are far enough along. And one thing I've read that artists suggest is when you find yourself making little changes, stop. Yeah. Just stop and stop fussing with it. I mean, part of it is, your body tells you you're tired. It's like stop a certain motion and all. For that one, which I don't have a very big studio, it's in a basement room. So the bottom was down here, and I had to buy a little scooter, so I could move back and forth without doing, frog steps. I'm a little too old to frog step my paintings, So I had to invent some things to work on these big ones. And I also invented the hanging system because I didn't want to get them framed. I kind of liked the raw look. So that was an adventure. The canvas I used on these long skinnies is a little bit lighter weight, and it didn't hang as well. So I put something on the bottom to make it hang better. That's all.
So for these other ones that don't
There,
have
yeah. Which I wouldn't recommend starting with because it's really hard to work on. It was really hard to stitch up when I got done. Yeah, well, the collages, I worked on the same time I was doing some of these big pieces, but sometimes I needed a break from them, and I didn't have room to do another big painting, so I would do a collage. And I told the story in my little statement that I bought this book a long time ago. It's by Alan Fletcher, and he was a famous British graphic designer. And this book is just filled with graphics and funny little sayings, and it's just a motherload of stuff. But when I first got it, I couldn't. I mean, you can't even read it. It's not. is not a linear work. It's a collection of images and sayings. It's roughly organized thematically, but and it smelled really bad when I got it. It has so much ink in it that it was making my eyes burn, and it just smelled bad. So I put it aside, and then maybe 3 years later I picked it up, and it's just full of all these great graphics. So I started cutting it up so I could use it in collage. And when I started this series, I think I did the cat one first, around the corner. I thought, well, maybe I'll just take little pieces in each one from this book, because it has this funny little subtext, I think. So that's how I developed those, and they were they're just fun. Collage is fun because you start with design. You're laying out all the pieces before you glue anything down, whereas the design sort of evolves as you're putting paint on. Yeah.
Do you ever combine them to put collage on your paintings?
I have sometimes. None of these have collage elements in them, but yeah, I have sometimes, especially if I'm working on a panel rather than a canvas. I think it adheres better. And it is kind of because you've got to figure it all out before you do anything else. Sometimes I add things at the end when a collage seems to be missing something. I'll add some paint or another element. But I do try to get them all laid out. I take pictures of them, I mark the edges, and then I glue things down. Whereas these, I just start with a mess and try to make some sense out of it as I go along. Have you all ever heard of David Mencken? He's a Cornwall painter, and his work is fabulous. So I brought my David Mencken book if anyone wants to look at it. And I think if you look at this piece in particular, you would see his influence. Oh.